Hey everybody, I'm Peter. I'm a solutions engineer at Brightcove in Sydney. I work with a number of our media customers, particularly on deploying server-side ad insertion across a variety of endpoints in the region. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the challenges associated with server-side ad insertion and delivery across different endpoints. I have a couple of key topics to talk about. And the first is to think about challenges associated with user targeting and measurement. Targeting is a key one, with a variety of methods used to track users and target them for advertising across different endpoints. Cookies are the classic approach here, really built out in a desktop web client and advertising world, where publishers and advertisers likewise could drop cookies on users and retarget them for advertising. But they're still heavily relied on, even though they are an endangered species. They never really worked on mobile web. They haven't been an option on mobile apps or big screens at all. And now we see desktop browsers like Safari and Firefox are starting to crack down on the ability to do third-party targeting using cookies. On mobile apps, device IDs were initially an approach to offer what cookies could do in the native app ecosystem, but they still have limited reach. They're available on some big screens, but not very widespread. And privacy concerns have led to things like Apple's latest changes in iOS 14, which I think will lead to a probably significant drop in people opting in to personalized advertising and the tracking associated with that. If a publisher knows about their users, they can use publisher-provided IDs for targeting. This can be helpful if a publisher is able to augment their user database with some data about them and sell that as part of their inventory. But it's still too narrow for broad programmatic use cases, particularly where an advertiser wants to do things like retargeting. There are some different vendors operating in this space. There's some things on the horizon coming from the IAB, but we don't really have a coherent marketplace for buying and selling of user data yet. The fundamental problem here is there's no commonly agreed standard, no standard way of targeting users across different publishers or across different endpoints. Another key challenge is when we think about measurement. And one of the key challenges with SSAI, particularly with long-form VOD, it's how we think about measuring fill. So if we think about a stream request happening, the SSAI service needs to fetch all possible ads to be able to present a coherent representation of the stream that it's going to serve. So it goes and fetches ads for each of the available slots within the video. As a user actually plays the content back, we fire off impressions for the ads that are seen. So impressions can be measured accurately, but we're left with this gap for those later mid-roll breaks, which is different to the way that classic client-side advertising would work, where it would instead only be fetching ads at the time it's ready to play them. So if a user abandons playback at this point, we're just left with this gap where no impressions have been fired away for those later mid-roll slots. To an ad server, this looks like poor performance. A publisher, a web page has requested a bunch of, made available a bunch of inventory, but not really delivered on it. Realistically, though, the only unfilled opportunity is if we've missed out on opportunities in the mid-roll breaks that a user did actually play through. There's some vast tracking associated with reporting where we failed to fill a slot. And Vast 4 introduces some tracking for being able to identify that those later mid-roll breaks went unused. This isn't really broadly adopted. It's not very well defined within the ecosystem. We think about measurement strategies. With server-side ad insertion, we can also use server-side or client-side beaconing. The classic way of working is with server-side, because with a stitch stream, one of the key value props is really being able to just deliver a manifest to any device, have it play out, not have to worry about a complex client implementation. But we are seeing that as more advanced client implementations come on board, and as device capabilities improve, that there is more and more client-side beaconing, which is certainly an improvement from an accuracy perspective. Measuring audience comes with many of the same key challenges associated with user targeting. We don't have a clear way of identifying who's actually watching what content. But this also ties into thinking about how the use of server-side ad insertion to serve big screens compares to the old world of cable or actual TV delivery. A standard built around an expectation that a household of 4 people is sitting around a TV watching a screen has different understanding of audience measurement to a digital one-for-one user sitting down on their device. So comparing this type of content viewing experience consistently is a challenge. And then finally, there are the standards around viewability and verification measurement. This really requires some client-side beaconing. If I want to know that not only was the ad actually served up to a device, but I want to know that it was on screen, I want to know that it was at least in view for a period of time, I need to run some client-side verification code. Historically, this has been a challenge with different vendors offering competing standards. The IAB has come some way with the open measurement specification, but unfortunately those SDKs are still only available for iOS and Android, so they really limit their reach. Makes it difficult to compare viewability measurement across web, mobile apps, and big screens, even if some of the expectations around what might actually be in view or in screen is going to be different on those different environments. But there's a common theme here, which is we don't really have a commonly agreed standard. We don't have consistent industry guidelines, consistent expectations across publishers and across endpoints around how to track advertising delivered to these devices. I'm going to pause for a drink. So the second big area is when we think about the challenges associated with actual delivery of media and device compatibility, particularly if we're trying to get broad reach. When we think about server-side ad insertion, it's fundamentally about trying to serve ads and content combined into a single stream. So think of a really simplified HLS manifest. This is just a text file with a series of fragments of content. So hey, if I want to add some ads in here, I can just edit the text file. I can add a couple of lines that might point to a segment that sits in a different location. But let's think about this a slightly different way. If each of those fragments is represented as a brick, first 10 seconds of content, next 10 seconds of content, next 10 seconds of content, and I just want to insert some ads between those segments, I can do this pretty quickly. I'm literally just moving some bricks around. But we never really want to insert an ad break right on the edge of a segment. Typically, we want to do something in the middle of a segment. So in this example, we have to break a brick in half. We're serving 5 seconds of it on one side of the ad break, 5 seconds on the other. This gets even messier when you think about different ad lengths, different break locations, and the ways that these flow through over a series of mid-roll breaks. Within the manifest, we can use discontinuities to at least help. Discontinuities are a hint to a player. Something about the media on the other side of this is different. It might be the encoding parameters we've used, the file formats, encryption. Typically, it's something about the timestamps. 15 seconds was before a break and 16 was sometime later. It might be something about the tracks that are available. But even with this ability to hint to some difference, many players or devices still trip up when they see the change. So there are other strategies to deal with this. One of the key things when we're trying to get to devices that don't really understand this difference is that we can start to stitch content and ads together. So imagine a single segment to the device. It still looks like 10 seconds of content. It just happens to contain 5 seconds of content and 5 seconds of my ad. The key challenge here is that every segment later in the stream then becomes unique to that particular end user session, particularly if users are getting different sets of ads, if they're getting different durations of ads. I don't think I've ever seen an ad served on the internet that says it's 15 seconds and is actually 15 seconds. In one session it might be 15, and the next it might be 16, and the next it's 15 and a half. So we're actually stitching all these different subsets of content. The permutations get out of hand. So from the server side, there's more that we need to do to minimize some of those variations. We can do things like pad ads out, shrink the sizes of segments just so there are fewer variations. But fundamentally, this is a trade-off that we need to consider when thinking about our device reach, our target devices. At least if you're going for a minimal set of devices, you have control over the playback environments, you might not need to worry about this at all. But when it comes to broad reach, it is worth thinking about the trade-offs between the cache impacts and what you're able to do to monetize those devices. I'll wrap it up here. Hopefully this is a good overview and a starting point to think about some of the challenges associated with SSAI. I'll be back on in a bit to answer any questions.